This this video might seem a little weird. I think you have to know this if you care to know me. If you're watching these videos, then you probably do care. Either that or you're just making fun of me. But I wanted to sort of explain, and I'm not doing this in an interview fashion because I don't know, I always feel kind of awkward about this. But I wanted to give my sort of testimony, explain my faith, as a engineer type, as a science guy, I'd call myself, and explain my testimony and my faith in God and why I believe, and if it can lead some of you confused guys that are younger versions of me down the right path. I'm not expecting to change anyone's opinion. But I think it's important that if you want to know me, then you sort of need to hear this story. So, as a kid, growing up in the trailer park, we didn't go to church. For some reason, I kind of wanted to go to church. I feel like I believed in God. I didn't really know what that meant. But I believed in, we celebrated Christmas and Easter, but we didn't go to church. And so right around the time I was about 14, we moved to Hazleton and started going to a Lutheran church. And oh gosh, it was brutal. I mean, I hated going. Maybe not in the very beginning, but it was a bunch of old geezers. sorry if you're a more mature individual. I was 15 at the time. And the Lutheran denomination is very similar to Catholic. They just have like this little book of Martin Luther that bores me to tears. But is very ritualistic. Forgive me if you're a Catholic. I'm not trying to bash anybody else's faith, and more trying to explain mine. But I was miserable. To the point, I got confirmed later in life. I read the Bible cover to cover. That was part of my deal. I had a curriculum that I went through on my own with the pastor or the priest, I guess you would call him. And the sort of the end result of my junior and high school years through with God and my faith is that I just decided I don't care. I decided, why am I doing this? This is boring. This is horrible. Just sitting here, stand up, sit down, sing this god-awful song. Excuse the pun. And I just sort of it became very clear to me that I never stepped foot in the Church of Villanova. I didn't want to be a Catholic. I just liked the idea that I thought Catholics were rich, so I wanted to be rich. So, my college years, I was never sort of atheistic, but I would call myself agnostic. I just didn't care. I didn't believe, depending on what day it was, but I didn't really think about it. It was all about me. I was very selfish. And so, fast forward, I moved to, when I graduated, I moved to Orlando and I met a girl, as you might imagine. And that girl is my wife. I always sort of believed, but I just I didn't care. I was just sort of agnostic about the whole thing. And so she, she was Mother Teresa, for gosh sakes. She had a little fish in her car. I didn't know what the heck that meant. I thought it was like a dealership sign or something like that. And my buddy said, no, I think that means that she's a Christian. And so, I always thought of myself, I guess I'm a Christian. I didn't really know what that meant. I guess I did know what I meant because I was confirmed. But to me, it was like, I'm just not religious, if you will. So she took me. We decided to go to. This is probably me just, and I started to believe, and she was sort of working on me, and so we were going to go to church, and I probably went just because I liked her, and I thought she was good looking, and if I wanted to be in her life, this is what I needed to do. So we went to church. It's called, the church called Northland, and it was sort of this growing mega church, and we went there, and it was like a rock concert. And I'm like, at first I was turned off. I'm like, this isn't church. They're not worshiping. This is ridiculous. They're just playing electric guitars and drums. You can't have that in church. And then some guy stood up there and just talked from the heart. And he wasn't like reading his prayer and doing the same sort of ritual over and over again. And I was like, this just isn't right. I mean, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. And then we went through marriage counseling at the church, and something started to wear on me. I'm like, I shouldn't be believing in this. I'm a scientist, I'm a mathematician, for gosh sakes, an engineer. And something, and it just seemed off. And so I just believe. I believe in God again. I believe in Jesus. I believe that Jesus died on the cross for our sins. And I would never tell anybody that. And I wouldn't ever go out and do what you're supposed to do, which is disciple and find, and I still to this day don't do that. This will be the extent of that. Part of it is I just don't have mercy. One of my spiritual gifts is certainly not mercy or compassion. You're on your own, brother. You figure it out. And I get it if you think that I'm freaking crazy. I understand that. But part of the deal, part of my transition, part of my story is I used to have the worst, the foulest language ever, and say the F word every other word. I sounded like an idiot. And my wife, through this process of me sort of discovering my faith again, I always sort of believed, but just kind of gave up on it. She said, people who speak like that just don't sound intelligent. Something clicked in my brain. I'm like, you know what? You're right. I said, I sound like an idiot. And from that day forward, I don't think I've said an F word since then. I mean, this is like 2004 or something like that, 2003. I just don't. I don't say use foul language. It's like something clicked in my brain. I'm like, this just isn't right. And again, I'm not trying to come across as some high and mighty dude. It's just that I just realized that I don't need to say that. All or nothing. I'm either going to F everything or I'm not saying it. I'm not even going to refer to it. So all or nothing. I was curse crazy, and now I don't say a bad word. So I had to replace it with some other weird words that I still throw out there sometimes. That I'm sure you guys have heard me on camera, but I don't typically use foul language. It's just something that I just equated to intelligence, and I stopped doing it. I don't fault others for using it. It just sort of has been one of those things that left me. Just like I stopped drinking lemonade because I drink a whole gallon. So I can't just have a glass of it and drink water. So my defining moment in my sort of story or my testimony is that we were at meeting with the pastor that was going to marry us, and he asked me, if you were to die today, do you believe that you would go to heaven? And I said, well, I can't guarantee that. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I don't know that for sure. And so then he sort of created this epiphany in my brain that if you believe that Jesus died on the died on the cross for our sins, and that it's not about being a good person, it's about that belief, it's about that faith that you will have a place in heaven, and that everyone sins, and Jesus died for our sins, and blah blah blah. You guys didn't know the story. It seems ridiculous to me. It seems very fantastical, and even to this day, I tend to second guess myself. But there's certain things that like the Darwinistic view just doesn't work for me. There's too many holes, and so I believe very simply in. And the thing that sort of actually really worked for me, let me say, is I discovered sort of the Southern Baptist religion, which really isn't religion. It's basically read the book and do what it says. And so one of the problems I always had with Catholicism or being a Lutheran or doing this sort of ritualistic stuff is some dude made half of this stuff up. It doesn't say to put ashes on your forehead on Ash Wednesday. That to me just seemed weird. Again, I'm not faulting you if you believe that, but it's just not, it just didn't sit well with me and turned me away. So naturally a girl led me down this path, and now I have sort of a purpose in that, okay, if I'm going to do the right thing for somebody, if I'm going to help somebody, if I'm going to donate to something, if I'm going to tithe to church, if I'm going to provide the right advice instead of the advice that might get me the most amount of money, there's a purpose, there's a reason for that, versus it's just I'm trying to be a good person. So that's my testimony, that's my story. It's not some super fantastic story where I, caught Jesus and running around in circles. I'm not the guy that again, this goes back to my apathy for being scholarly. I know we're supposed to read the book every day and learn and grow closer to God. I struggle with that, just like I struggle doing my math homework. I know that's an excuse, but that's the truth. So one of the things that bothers me is I feel like I have this ability to take and be a sort of a leader, be a disciple, be a teacher, but it just hasn't clicked. I just haven't. Maybe I'm supposed to. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but I'm certainly not going to walk around and knock on people's doors and hand out Bibles. I'm not doing that. I'm not going on mission trips to third world countries where they had machine guns stuck in my head. I just can't. The mercy gene in me doesn't exist. So again, buddy, you're on your own. If you want to talk about it, go talk to somebody who knows more about it. But this is what I believe and why. So that's my story. That's my testimony. I know it's not super awesome and super exciting, and I know some of you guys are probably looking at this saying, "You're an idiot. How could you possibly believe this crazy story?" But I do. I have faith. I believe in God. I believe that Jesus died for our sins. I believe it. What do I got to lose? Is the way I look at it. It doesn't make 100%. It doesn't make clear sense to me. I look out at the trees outside and try to figure out how they're created, and I don't have an answer, and I don't think anybody does, and I don't think anybody ever will. So I have to believe in some sort of creative design. Rather than a bunch of proteins floating in a soup of algae that turns into a human. That just doesn't work for me. The probability of that is so great. It's not possible. So I always think of it as, I heard this somewhere, read this somewhere about, imagine the game of Scrabble that the tiles had no letters on them. Now, who knows how the tiles are created, right? The tiles, just assume the wooden tiles are there. And you have a paintbrush, and you throw all the tiles in the air and you just start flicking paint in the air. That would be the equal to the odds of creating, the simplest protein. That you'd be able to create sort of a whole grouping of letters in the game of Scrabble by just closing your eyes and flicking some paint. Now, where are we getting the paint from? Where are we getting the letters from? That's the other question that I don't think is answered. But the probability of that is so infinitesimal that it just doesn't make sense how you can have this soup of stuff that just or sort of Darwinianism evolution that we evolved from algae. It just doesn't work for me. And maybe we can have a philosophical argument in that. I don't know that I'm the guy to have that argument. But that's my belief, and if you care to watch this one, that's me, and that's what you get. So thanks for